Welcome to the Million Pound Mission Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Shively, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, and I'm on a 1 million pound mission. I've personally lost over 100 pounds. I've helped my hometown lose over 35,000 pounds, and now I'm on a mission to produce over 1 million pounds of results by helping you gain clarity about what you need to do to reach your goals and give you the confidence to take action. And my friends, the perfect time to start taking action is now. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Million Pound Mission Podcast. It's your buddy Adam, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, and this is episode number 185, Building Our Resilience Muscle with Sandra Younger. And before we dive into this, it's a super incredible story. Like, you guys are gonna be blown away with what exactly Sandra went through, how she got out of it, and how she's using that experience to help other people. Real quick before we dive into that, stay tuned after the episode. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've got going on with my Transformation Reboot program and how it can help you survive and navigate the upcoming holiday season. It's coming. The holidays are coming. So let's dive into this episode here. We all know that it's important to exercise so we can build that lean muscle tissue, and that helps us reach our body transformation goals. But today, we're going to talk a little bit about building a different kind of muscle. Now, I'm bringing my friend Sandra Younger in to teach us about building our resilience muscle so that we can better handle the tough circumstances that life tends to consistently throw at us. Sounds good, right? Now, Sandra, like I said, she's got an incredible story. She lost her home, 12 neighbors, and nearly her own life in a California wildfire. And after the fire, Sandra discovered that personal resilience is both a natural strength and a skill set that we can build just like a muscle. Now, combining her own recovery experience with leading academic research, she developed her comeback formula, which is a 5-step system of powerful common sense practices proven to transform disaster into opportunity and loss into legacy. This is something that we all need, right? We all need that resilience muscle built up so that we can handle adversity more effectively, more efficiently, so we don't give up on ourselves. So this is a very important topic. I know that you're going to love it. So let's dig in with episode number 185, Building Our Resilience Muscle with Sandra Younger. All right, Sandra, welcome to the Million Pound Mission Podcast. How are we doing today, my friend?
We are doing great. Adam, how are you doing?
I'm fired up. This is going to be a really interesting conversation. You are somebody that brings, I know you are full of energy, and I was excited when we met each other. And I know that you are somebody that's going to teach my audience a skill set that we all need to work on in resilience. So I know that you have a really inspiring and interesting story. And I just want to start there. Let's start with your story.
Well, that's a good place to start because I love to hear a good comeback story. And that comes from my background as a journalist, collecting people's stories. And also, I ended up with a pretty amazing comeback story of my own. It started about 15 years ago now. And my husband, Bob, and I decided we wanted to branch out from the suburbs. We were living in San Diego. Our kids had taken off for college. So we said, let's move to the country. And naively, we found this beautiful house on the side of a mountain with this stellar view down a canyon. Honestly, I kid you not, Adam, I can see Mexico from my house.
Wow.
It's just gorgeous. So we were in heaven. There was a lot of wildlife running around, and even one day on my way to work, I saw a bobcat running down the road, and the name of this place we moved to just happened to be Wildcat Canyon. So I thought, oh, there's a real wildcat in Wildcat Canyon. How cool is that? So we just loved this new place, right? It was our new life. And about 7 months after we moved, we woke up in the middle of the night to the sight of fire outside our windows. Fire all across the mountain on the other side of the canyon from us, and then this glow way down deep in the canyon that told us the fire was on our side too, and we should have already been gone.
Wow.
So we knew we had no time. We grabbed our animals. We had these two great big shaggy Newfoundland dogs. Do you know that breed?
Yeah, so it's huge. You probably could have rode the Newfie out of the house.
Just about.
Yeah.
Yeah, just about. It's just hard to get a saddle on them, though. But just think black St. Bernards. And then we had this little brainless cockatiel, Chelsea, and I say she's brainless because I took care of her and she loved my husband. So not a lot of mental power there. But anyway, we grabbed her, we stuffed her in a traveling cage, and we jumped in the closest car, which happened to be my little Acura sports coupe. Couldn't have been Bob's giant Suburban, which would have made a lot more sense because we couldn't find the keys to that. So there's an important lesson. All right, so we are in this little car. I'm driving. We're backing out from our garage into a tornado of red embers. And just as we start to pull away from our beloved new home, we see this huge wall of light and fire just wrapping around everything. But, we couldn't stay. So we take off and we now have to negotiate a skinny sliver of asphalt that is carved into the side of this mountain. And just as we got to the most treacherous part, we hit the smoke. And for those of you who have never been caught in smoke, which I hadn't, it's like being in total dense fog. It's like looking out the window of an airplane into a cloud. And I couldn't see anything. So I started screaming, I can't see the road. And my husband screamed back, well, just don't wreck the car.
Oh, my.
So what he really meant, of course, was don't drive off the side of this mountain.
Right.
And just at this moment, we're lost in the smoke. We're teetering on the edge of oblivion. A bobcat jumps in front of my car, right to my headlights, and takes off into the smoke. And something in me knew that cat was on the road, just like I'd seen a cat on the road before. And something in me knew to follow him. So I followed this bobcat, Adam, and he led me through the worst of the smoke so that we could negotiate our way through the rest of the fire, through two lines of fire on either side, and finally pop out into clear night again. And that is how Bob and I and our two shaggy Newfoundland dogs and Chelsea, the brainless cockatiel, escaped what became known as the Cedar Fire here in San Diego in 2003, which for 14 years until last year, until 2017, was the biggest wildfire in California history.
Wow. What an intense experience. I mean, I know I freak out just if my fire alarm goes off in the middle of the night because the batteries are low. And, you run around the house freaking out, and I'm like grabbing the kids, and we're just like, okay, it's just the batteries. But I can't imagine waking up and seeing that,
Yeah.
I mean, so what, obviously in that moment, what's going through your head as far as, were you just in like, I have to survive no matter what? Like, what was your mindset in that moment of, what were you focusing on? Was it just one foot in front of the other, or was it, or
That's
do you like remember it at all even?
I remember it. And I recorded it all because I wrote a book about the fire called The Fire Outside My Window, not just our story, but the whole story. And in the book, I talk about this mental shift that happened. And Bob and I talked about it later, and it happened to both of us. And I guess maybe it was the first time I'd ever been in a truly life or death situation because I hadn't experienced it before. But there's a switch that goes off inside your head, and you're not so much thinking as doing. And something protective kept us moving one step at a time, as you say, to get us out of there. We looked at things we wanted to grab and thought, we don't have time for that. And we just kept moving step by step until we were out of the worst of the danger. But it is a real mindset shift that happens, like almost like a physiological switch.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's an incredible story. So obviously you can't go through that and not be impacted by it. So where did you go from there? Once you survived the situation, obviously there's a lot of, damage to deal with, and, losing things, losing people that houses and all that. But how did the experience impact you? And then what did you do with that experience moving forward?
that's how I discovered what we're going to talk about today, which is the comeback formula, which is steps we can take to build our resilience like a muscle. The fire had an enormous impact on all of San Diego. So this metropolitan area of 3 million people, there were 500,000 people evacuated at one time. There were about 24 homes burned and 17 people killed. And we've seen this happen over and over again in the last 15 years. We saw it just last year in Northern California. It's a horrific thing, and entire neighborhoods are leveled. It's like bombs went off. So our home was one of those 2,400 that was lost, and 12 of the 17 casualties were our neighbors.
Wow.
In this Wildcat Canyon area where we lived. We didn't know any of them personally at that point, but they lived within a mile of us. They were doing the same things we were doing at the same time. So it's a miracle that I'm here.
Yeah.
And I felt that as a journalist, I was a magazine journalist, I was editing a magazine at that time, that it was my job. Almost, it felt like a sacred responsibility to tell the story of what happened so it wouldn't be forgotten. So all of these people who would no longer be able to tell their own stories wouldn't be forgotten. So I started right away to do interviews. I ended up doing over 100 interviews. And what I discovered was, well, first of all, in the aftermath, we realized that people were calling us victims, Adam, fire victims. And, it just happened overnight. Like one night we were fine. We were enjoying our new home. Life was good. The next moment we're homeless and everybody's calling us victims. And I thought, well, that's not right, because we survived. We got out with, physically unscathed, with no physical damage to ourselves. And how can we be victims? We're survivors.
Right.
We're survivors. So as I did these interviews, I realized that most of the people I talked to felt that way. We got knocked down, but we're coming back. That is our inner resilience that's in our DNA, our survival instinct. We are going to reboot. We are going to rebuild better than ever. Yep. That's part of all of us. I also met this subset of people who did embrace the victim label. And they were bitter and they were angry. Somebody should have stopped this. Somebody should have saved their house. Somebody should bump them to the front of the line waiting for a building permit. They were really bitter. And the really interesting thing, Adam, was it didn't seem to matter. Of all the people I interviewed, the bitter ones, it didn't seem to matter how much or how little they had lost in the fire. In fact, the most bitter man I talked to had lost his garage. And I talked with 2 different families who had each lost 3 family members, 3 people in your family gone. And they weren't bitter. Obviously, they were grief-stricken, but they said, no, our family members wouldn't want us to spend the rest of our lives being sad and angry. So that was my first clue. That was my first clue into what became the comeback formula, that there was an element of choice in these situations. That no matter what happens to us, even though we may not have chosen whatever happened to us and may have had no control over it, we retain control over our attitude, over our ability to choose. I like to say we get to choose our story going forward. Yeah. We can be victims if we want to be, or we can be survivors. And survivors have this sneaky way of evolving to become thrivers and then givers, sharing what they've learned, and even some of them changers who are leveraging their own personal loss into a legacy for the world. And we see this in a lot of the people we very most admire, people like Malala and the Dalai Lama and Nelson Mandela and Steve Jobs, all overcame this tremendous personal adversity and turned it into blessings for the world. So that's the choice that we get right out of the chute whenever we hit some challenge, no matter how big or how small. How are we going to think about this? Are we going to be victims, or are we going to choose our story as a survivor on our way to becoming victors? Yeah. That was the great lesson for me.
I love that. And it applies directly to what I see a lot in weight loss. When people are transforming their bodies, I tell people always ask me, what's the most efficient exercise? What exercise do I need to be doing? I said, the hardest exercise you will ever do is going from pointing your finger that way to pointing your finger this way and taking personal responsibility.
There you go.
It's not because your mom treated you a certain way growing up. It's not because one guy tried to tell me that he couldn't follow my diet because his wife won't cook him the right food. I'm like, yes, at the year 1960 call, they want their attitude back. We broke him of that. I said, dude, you have to take personal responsibility
really?
Of your situation. But that's the exact thing that you're talking about. So I love this. Let's keep going. Let's dive into the comeback formula and go deep on that, because my audience needs to hear this, Sandra.
Yeah, we all need to hear this. So again, I discovered that resilience is innate, but we can also build it as a muscle. So just to add on a little bit to this element of choice, I found a quote by this wise sage who has left a trail for us to follow, named Viktor Frankl. I love his name. He was aptly named. Do you know about Viktor Frankl?
A little bit.
Yeah. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist who was caught up in the Holocaust, lost his entire family in the Holocaust, and he himself was imprisoned in the worst of the concentration camps, Dachau, Auschwitz. He survived by the skin of his teeth, and he came out and he wrote this beautiful book I highly recommend. It only takes about an hour to read it, called Man's Search for Meaning. So here's the quote that I found of his. He says, "The last of the human freedoms is the freedom to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way." So even though I knew I could not compare my loss to Viktor Frankl's incredible depth of suffering, I resonated with that. And I thought, well, maybe there's a set of steps that's the same in coming back from something, no matter what the inciting incident. And that's when I discovered all of these other principles. There's an entire body of research that people have been working on for decades, unbeknownst to me, called resilience. It's called resilience. And there's a subset of that called post-traumatic growth syndrome, or well, I don't guess they call it a syndrome, but post-traumatic growth, which indicates that some of us use adversity or setbacks as sort of a springboard to greater achievement and enrichment. So as I started to look through this body of research, I started to see ways I could synthesize them all. That's what we journalists do. We do all this research and we synthesize it down into bite-sized nuggets, right? So I've found 5 principles, 5 practices actually, that I call the comeback formula. And all of the different things we know from resilience research that we can do to grow our resilience, our comeback muscle, if you will, I put into these 5 buckets.
All right.
So
let's dive into the buckets. Yeah.
All right. So first bucket, come, in the word comeback formula, means come to a place of gratitude. Gratitude is the antidote to almost any negative emotion. So if you're feeling pissy, if you're feeling wronged, what is one tiny thing that's going right for you today? That will begin to lift you out of what I think of as a quicksand situation where we're just bogged down in this bitterness and blame and anger and hurt. And that's what I saw in these people I met. And guess what? I met some of them like 10 years later, and they still were that way. They had subscribed to this miserable way of life.
Yep. So
come to a place of gratitude. Hundreds of studies on the effectiveness of gratitude. Then the next 4 follow the letters BACK, right? Come back. So B stands for 2 things, Adam. It stands first for be patient with the pain, because we're going to be in that quicksand for a while. There's no way around it. Loss is loss. Grief is a process. So be patient with the situation, with the pain, with yourself. And yet, the second B, believe you can come back, because resilience is part of who we are. We are part of a resilient universe. This is why winter always turns into spring, right?
Right.
We've got that stuff in us too. So be patient with the process, with the pain, but believe you can come back. Then the A, this is the toughest one. A stands for accept help. Accept the help that is probably already being offered to you.
Yep.
Instead of saying, no, I'm good. Accept that help and be tough enough to ask for help when you need it, including professional counseling for a while, which Bob and I did. We don't like to ask for help. You know, we don't want to admit that we need help. And yet we're social creatures. We are designed to live within communities. We're designed to be interdependent. And if you don't believe it about people, look at bees or wolves or birds that fly in flocks, that one of them alone is not going to make it very long. And yet we try to go it alone, you know? Yeah. So A is to accept help and ask for it when you need it. That's why people come to you, right?
Yeah.
They're being courageous enough to finally ask for help.
Yeah, I get a lot of people that are kind of interested in possibly asking me for help, but a lot of them tell themselves this story of, well, I feel like I need to be self-accountable first, and then I'll learn to be accountable to somebody else. I'm like, no, that's the exact opposite. It's like, if you want to learn how to speak Spanish, you know, you are going to have a much easier time if somebody teaches you how to speak Spanish and they kind of hold you accountable with assignments and homework versus just trying to figure it out on your own. And
Absolutely.
It's the same thing with our body. We have to ask for help, look at somebody that's done something that you want to accomplish, and allow them to show you the way. And it's the most efficient way to do anything.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, how many of us would even have made it through sixth grade if we didn't have teachers and parents holding us accountable, right? Yep. So that's good because that leads us right into the C in comeback, which we've already talked about at length, which is to choose. You get to choose your story. Like, as you just said, let's switch that story around. Choose a different story. Guess what? You have total control over the story you choose, right? You can be a victim. You can say, well, it's because my wife won't cook for me, or it's because my mom was mean to, whatever the excuse is, that is making you a victim. Why not choose a different story? Why not choose to be a survivor of whatever happened and now to be a thriver and a victor over that? And guess what? That's what all of life is. It's ups and downs. So if we choose this victim mentality, we're going to be in that quicksand forever. Choose a different story. And K, the last one, is keep moving forward. So what this talks about is the fact that the past cannot come back. It's a new normal from now on. And as much as we will grieve what we've lost that we loved, we can't have it. It's possible, though, to have something new and in many ways even better. So when we can gradually detach from this past that cannot come back and keep moving forward, keep looking forward, we can embrace these possibilities and opportunities of a new future. And we can then do this sort of personal alchemy of transforming disaster into opportunity and even transforming loss into legacy. Now, a really important piece of this, keeping a forward gaze and forward momentum, is forgiveness. If we can't forgive others, if we can't forgive ourselves for what happened or what we perceive to be someone's part in what happened or our part, we're stuck in the quicksand. Yep. We're stuck until we can forgive. Forgiveness is a really important piece of moving forward. It may only happen gradually, but we want to keep working on it so we don't end up being stuck.
Yeah, I recently did an episode about an issue that I call dealing with weight gain guilt. And it's that self-forgiveness, because somebody will hire me to coach them, or they'll do one of my boot camps or whatever, and they lose 50 pounds or whatever, and they're like feeling like a hero, but then some sort of life happens moment,
they gain it back,
and they gain it back, and then they're embarrassed by that, and they may even start to project some of that onto me a little bit, like, oh, he didn't do the right thing or whatever. But a lot of that is just being able to forgive ourselves and be like, you know what, something happened, I wasn't ready for it. You know, I can choose again to go into victim mode or into that courageous space outside of our comfort zone. And it's hard. That's what people need to realize, is that doing this process, it's going to be hard. This isn't just like, oh, I follow this 5-step formula and I'm like Tony Robbins, all of a sudden I'm converted over and I'm this magnet of awesomeness. It's going to be hard because it's outside of our comfort zone. So why isn't everybody doing this, Sandra? Why are people hesitant to plug into this format? Is it just because they realize that it's going to be hard, or they don't want to get out the side of their comfort zone? Or why are you seeing people either not applying this correctly? Where are we messing this up? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Well, I think most people do find their way into this. I know we kind of bumbled into it. I wish I'd had 5 points that were succinct. Not that this is, again, Adam, there are people who have devoted their scholarly lives as academics to studying this, and I've, put it into these 5 little handy dandy points, but just as touchstones, not to be attempting to be conclusive about it or all encompassing, but as touchstones to come back to. What am I doing wrong if I feel off track? Well, how about gratitude? Am I being grateful for what I have right now? Oh, I forgot about that. How about accepting someone's help, or maybe who can I ask for help? And what about our attitude? Sometimes I just say to people, if you're feeling really down, who's some character from a book or a movie that you admire? Who would power through this? Who do you want to be like today, right? Maybe you can be like Katniss Everdeen today, right? Just channel her a little bit. So they're different practices, but why don't people do them? I think the biggest reason is there are a couple of reasons that I can think of, and certainly by no means exhaustive. One is they don't realize they have a choice. They don't realize. I talked with a man once who introduced himself to me as a victim of the Cedar Fire. And I tried to be really careful and compassionate in saying, he wasn't being bitter and confrontational like some of the others who said, well, I do consider myself a victim. Because I would say, when people call me a victim, actually, I like to think of myself as a survivor. And I had one guy say, well, I do think of myself as a victim. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about a guy who was saying, I'm a victim. And I suggested to him that he could think of himself as a survivor. And it changed him. And on our way out of this meeting where we'd met each other, he saw me at the door and he said, you know what? I think I am going to start thinking of myself as a survivor now. And I was thrilled because I thought he just didn't know he had the choice. So that's one reason. Another reason is people lose hope. People don't realize that they can come back. So again, it's something they just don't know. And we see tragic examples of this after every disaster. We don't hear about it so much in the news, but after every disaster, there's somebody who doesn't know they can come back and have no hope. And they go out and they end their lives because they feel like, I'll never get past this. And I'll bet you anything that in your line of work, there are people who feel so defeated and hopeless about the amount of weight that they have to lose or how many times they've tried and it has come back, that they feel there's no hope. So part of our job is to say, yes, there is hope. You are resilient by nature, and you can build your resilience like a muscle.
I love it.
You can come back.
Yeah, the opening statement you just made about there is a choice, like realizing we have a choice. Because sometimes we have a choice. The world has kicked my ass and there was no other option, but there is a choice in how we react. We can always choose how we react to that stimulus. And what you just mentioned there at the end about, it's interesting. I feel like things happen for a reason. And so 2 days ago, Sandra, something blew my mind that I didn't even realize. I didn't even realize this kind of impact was possible for me. It's never even crossed my mind. So I get to guest on other people's shows and stuff. And there was one called Underdog Empowerment, a new podcast, a guy named Zach Babcock, really good interviewer. And he's asked me a few things, and I went into full bore Adam mode. I was like another level of energy and motivation that I hadn't hit yet. And so I get this Facebook message, and the individual said, it was big message. And he said that suicide was on the table. Like he was strongly considering suicide. He heard the interview and it turned his thought process around. And I was just like, I didn't even know how to react to that. I'm like,
oh, Adam, you saved somebody's life.
What do I tell this person? And it's just like, and it's not, it just blew me away that somebody, just the luck of it, because he wasn't even a subscriber. Somebody had shared the episode. It came across their Facebook feed. He clicks on it by chance, listens to that. It's the right thing. And I'm just like, holy moly. So I wish I had already had this conversation with you before. I sent him a heartfelt reply. He responded back and everything's good. But what do you say to somebody, like if you could sit that guy down and say, when he's thinking in those terms of suicidal thoughts, you can sit that person down and you try to flip that switch. What are you going to say? How are you going to help that type of a person apply the comeback formula and become more resilient and realize that there is a choice?
Well, first of all, let's adjust the story you just told, because you kept using the word chance. I would venture to guess that nothing in that interchange in that situation was by chance. That man was probably praying for a solution. This is another way of asking for help, right? Is to pray, even if you're not sure anybody's listening. But the thing is, when we pray for solutions, we seem to expect the heavens to open and some, golden chariot to come down drawn by white horses with a big solution in it. Prayers are answered through people, and you may very well have been an answer to that man's prayer. What would we tell him? We would tell him that there is hope. We would tell him that he can come back, that no matter what his mind might be telling him, that he is resilient by nature and that there are things he can do to build that resilience and to create a new future that is in many ways richer than what he's known before. I would also say to that person, and I said it to a disaster survivor just yesterday, please go and find some professional support. Yeah. There is no shame in going to get counseling, especially when you're feeling that desperate, when you're feeling hopeless. We wouldn't limp around with a broken leg. Why are we so hesitant? Why do we think it's a character flaw or something to go get professional counseling from a psychologist or some other mental health professional? Bob and I did it, and it really speeded up our recovery. It was just for a few months. We just went to someone and said, look, we've been through a trauma. We don't know what the way back is going to look like or what it's supposed to look like. And we didn't want to fall off that mountain any more than we'd wanted to fall off the real mountain. Yeah. And, we went and checked in with him every week or so, and he would tell us what felt normal, what was normal. And basically, he assured us that we were on track. And after a while, he said, okay, you're fine. Get out of here. That's exactly what he said, his clinical term, get out of here.
Get out of here.
So that's what I would say to people who are feeling desperate, feeling hopeless, is please do yourself a big service and go get some professional support and know that things are not as hopeless as they feel, that you can come back. Resilience is in your DNA.
We do have a choice. We do
have a choice.
Yep. So now you've mentioned a couple of times about working resilience like a muscle, and we can build it up. And I know that you've got an awesome tool on your website, and my audience knows that I love free downloads and tools. It's one of the things I do. I'm like cursed with this ability. I see a problem and I create a tool for it, Sandra, and then I give it away for free. I'm like, just take it. I'm a terrible entrepreneur. Just take it all. So I think you're somebody after my own heart that loves to just help people. And so let's talk about your website first and how we can get our hands on your tool to help us with building resilience.
Right. Well, this is right down your alley then, because I decided to give the candy shop away. My website is just my name, sandrayounger.com, Younger just like it sounds. So sandrayounger.com. If you go there, you'll see a picture of me and just scroll down a couple of panels, and then you'll see a picture of my Comeback Formula guidebook and a button underneath where you can just see it for free. I'm not sure you can actually download it. You can access it on this very cool flipbook site. So you can read through the whole thing. So what's in here? The 5 principles and practices of the comeback formula we've been talking about, a little bit more explanation, a little bit of the science behind them, a little chunk of story from my book, The Fire Outside My Window, which of course I also recommend, right? I'm an author. I have to push the book. It's a great read. People on Amazon say I couldn't put it down. I love that.
Nice.
So you'll see a little bit of story, and implementing the comeback formula is easy when you have this guidebook, because I've got a series of exercises you can do. So it's not just information going in one ear and out the other. There are exercises there that you can put into play in your life right now to start building resilience.
Yeah, that's a huge issue. I feel like with podcasts especially, or blogs, blog readers, and people are like, oh, that's super cool information. That's a neat process. I should probably do that. And then out it goes. And having a tool and really challenging people, I challenge my listeners to take action within 24 hours of every episode. And if I can get them a tool or a download or something to do that brain dump and get all their notes out and have something to think through and have a process, then we have a fighting chance of actually accomplishing something out of this. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that very, very much.
You're welcome. And I agree. It's a fire hose of information out there. We have an embarrassment of riches with the web, and it's so easy to see every new possibility and think, oh, I want to do that. And then we buy stuff we don't even use. So that's why I tried to make it implementable. And the best thing, to use your accountability point, find somebody else to go through this with you and do it as a partnership.
Yep.
Keep each other accountable.
Yep. I'm a big fan of accountability anchor points. You got to lock in and anchor into that mountain as we climb the mountain of health and fitness. You got to anchor on as often as possible. So bring a friend with you. So Sandra, I appreciate you so much. Obviously, you bring, like I said, a tool and a concept that needs to be spoken about. It's something that we can all apply across the board. Being able to, again, shift that finger of blame from pointing away and being a victim to taking ownership. It's a skill set that we all need to hone in on and develop. So I feel like your voice needs to be heard. I'm excited to be part of the people that are out there sharing your voice and your message.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing, of course, is that I am a speaker and I'm a workshop leader. So if anyone listening knows an organization or a community who would like to hear more about this and have some in-person training, again, you can contact me through my website and we'll just bring it personally to you.
Excellent. That sounds awesome to me. And I'll reach out to some connections here at my local university that may have some interest in that. So we'll see if I can work some connections for you, Sandra.
Awesome, Adam. Well, I just want to give you a big shout out for everything you're doing. You're just a beacon of light in this world, and your own story is so inspiring. And I know you're such a motivation for so many people out there. So thank you so much
I appreciate
for your
my friend
contributions.
Thank you. That means a lot. And I'm glad to always link up with like-minded people, and people have that kind of similar vibration. I feel like you and I, we kind of vibrate at the same frequency a little bit, high energy, high positivity. And when we combine our forces, it usually leads to a great podcast. So I'm excited to get this one out there. Now, everybody out there, I want to challenge you guys. As we talked about just a few minutes ago, I don't want you to just be entertained and hear, oh, that's a really inspiring story, or sometimes I'm more funny and, oh, that was funny and that, entertaining or whatever. I want you to apply. I want you to put things into action. That's so, so critical. So I want you to think the different steps of the formula. Maybe there's one that really rung true to you, like, I need to implement that. So let's think about implementing that in the next 24 hours. Which one do you need to get the ball rolling with? Where can you improve your resiliency? Easy for me to say. And where can you take action and get the momentum building? Because that, my friends, is how we win the game. That's how we become that person that can handle adversity better. And that is how we get out there. That's how we own it. Every meal, every workout, every day. I will see you on the next episode. Hey, thanks for hanging out after the show. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode with Sandra. She's got such a great message, a true purpose, and a great heart. I hope that connected with you. Now, before the show, I mentioned we've got some things cooking to help you navigate the holiday season. This is treacherous time of year for many people where you do good heading into the holidays and then we kind of lose it, so to speak. We lose our drive and our motivation. We don't lose weight. During the holidays, we gain weight. So let's break that cycle this year. My Transformation Reboot program is a great idea, something to dive a little deeper on. There's 2 phases with the program. Phase 1 is the 10-day mini mastermind where we dig deep, reverse your momentum, and put a game plan in place. Then in phase 2, we get you into the transformation support community. We're doing small group chats, some one-on-one Skype hot seat calls, and then a little bit of live casting, but there's group support. There's some synergy there, and we want to make sure that you feel like you are ready to tackle the holidays this year. This is an ongoing program, so you're going to have that community there with you every step of the way. You can check out all the info on millionpoundmission.com. Our next group is launching in November. It's the perfect time. Sometimes people say, well, the holidays, that's just not the ideal time. It's the perfect time, especially if you have fallen victim to regaining all of your weight during the holidays, season after season after season. It's time to break that cycle. Check it out, millionpoundmission.com, the Transformation Reboot.